Marcus Kane drifted through the void in his damaged fighter, watching the last of his fuel reserves tick down to nothing. The small craft shuddered as another system failed, sending red warning lights dancing across his scarred face. He had been flying for 3 days straight, running from the Terran Federation fleet that had stripped him of his rank, his honor, and his home. The court-martial had been swift and brutal. 20 years of distinguished service meant nothing when politicians needed a scapegoat. The massacre on Kepler Station was blamed on his tactical decisions, never mind that his superiors had ignored his warnings about the alien defenses. Now Marcus Kane, former captain of the Federation Marines, was labeled a war criminal and banished beyond the frontier worlds. His ship's computer chimed weakly. Unknown star system detected. Multiple large life signs on the third planet. Atmosphere suitable for human life. Marcus looked at the green world spinning slowly below him. It seemed peaceful enough, covered in vast forests and crystalline mountains that caught the light of its twin suns. He had no choice anyway. The ship was dying around him, and this was his only chance at survival. The landing was rough. His fighter carved a burning scar through the forest before finally coming to rest in a clearing beside a mountain range. Marcus crawled from the wreckage, his left arm hanging useless at his side. The air was clean and sweet, filled with strange scents he couldn't identify. That was when he saw them. The dragons emerged from caves high in the mountain walls, their massive forms blotting out the alien suns. They were nothing like the myths from Earth. These creatures were elegant and deadly, with scales that shifted colors like liquid metal. Each one was easily 40 meters long, with wings that could create hurricanes when they flew. The largest dragon, its scales a deep purple that seemed to absorb light, landed with earth-shaking force just 20 meters away. Its eyes were intelligent, ancient, and filled with a cold fire that made Marcus reach instinctively for his sidearm. "Human," the dragon spoke, its voice resonating through his bones. "You bring the stench of war to our sanctuary." Marcus slowly raised his hands, keeping his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm just passing through. My ship is damaged. I'll leave as soon as I can repair it." The dragon's massive head tilted, studying him with those burning eyes. "You are marked by violence. Your kind has brought nothing but death to the stars. Why should we not end your existence now?" "Because I'm no threat to you," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "I'm banished from my own people. I have nowhere else to go." Other dragons had gathered, forming a semicircle around the crashed fighter. Marcus counted at least 12 of the massive beasts, each one capable of reducing him to ash with a single breath. But something in their behavior struck him as odd. They seemed protective, defensive. "Your weapons," the purple dragon commanded. "Remove them, slowly." Marcus complied, carefully placing his plasma pistol and combat knife on the ground before stepping back. "I don't want to fight you. I just need time to repair my ship." "Impossible," another dragon said, this one with golden scales that shimmered in the sunlight. "Your vessel is beyond repair. The fusion core is cracked, the navigation system destroyed. You are stranded here, human." Marcus felt his heart sink. Without his ship, he was truly alone in the universe. But before he could respond, a new sound cut through the air. It was a roar, but not from the dragons around him. This sound was deeper, more savage, and it came from the forest behind him. The dragons reacted immediately, their casual postures shifting to combat readiness. Wings spread, necks arched, and Marcus could feel the air beginning to heat as they prepared their fire. "Void Stalkers!" the purple dragon hissed. "They have found us again!" Marcus spun around to see creatures emerging from the tree line. They looked like nightmares made flesh, with chitinous black shells and too many legs that moved in unsettling patterns. Each one was the size of a tank, with mandibles that could crush steel and eyes like burning coals. "How many?" Marcus asked, his military instincts kicking in despite the situation. "Too many," the Golden Dragon replied. "They come in waves, testing our defenses. They seek our young." "Your young?" The Purple Dragon's eyes narrowed. "Our nursery lies within the mountain. 3 dozen eggs that will hatch within the cycle. The Void Stalkers would devour them all." Marcus watched the alien predators spreading out along the forest edge, their movements coordinated and intelligent. There had to be at least 50 of them visible, with more moving in the shadows. His tactical mind automatically began analyzing their formation, looking for weaknesses. "They're flanking you," he said suddenly. "Those 3 groups moving through the trees. They're trying to draw your attention to the front while others circle around to the caves." The dragons looked where he pointed, their enhanced vision picking out details he could barely see. The Purple Dragon's expression shifted from suspicion to something that might have been respect. "You see their strategy clearly, human, but knowledge alone will not save our young." A void. Stalker screeched from the forest, and the sound was answered by dozens of others. The attack was beginning. Marcus looked at his discarded weapons, then at the dragons preparing for battle. He thought about his destroyed ship, his ruined life, his banishment from everything he had ever known. He had nothing left to lose. "I can help," he said. The Purple Dragon stared at him. "You would fight beside us? Your kind destroyed 3 of our worlds before we drove them away. Why would you risk your life for our offspring?" Marcus picked up his plasma pistol, checking the charge. "Because it's the right thing to do." For a moment, the only sound was the chittering of the Void Stalkers as they prepared their assault. Then the Purple Dragon lowered its great head until it was level with Marcus. "I am Zephyrus, keeper of the Sky Flame. If you fight with us, human, you fight until death. There can be no retreat while our young remain in danger." "Marcus Kane, former Captain Terran Federation Marines," Marcus replied, saluting out of old habit. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The first wave of Void Stalkers burst from the forest with inhuman shrieks. Dragons took to the air, breathing streams of superheated plasma that turned the attacking creatures to vapor. But more kept coming, and Marcus could see the flanking groups moving through the trees exactly as he had predicted. "Zephyrus!" he shouted over the roar of battle. "The caves! They're going for the caves!" The great dragon swept down, his claws ripping through a cluster of Void Stalkers like they were made of paper. "Defend the entrance, human! I will rally the others!" Marcus ran toward the mountain, his damaged arm forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. He had been in countless battles during his military career, but never one like this. Never fighting alongside beings who had been his enemies just minutes before. A Void Stalker broke through the dragon's perimeter, its multiple legs carrying it with terrifying speed toward the cave entrance. Marcus dropped to one knee and fired his plasma pistol, the bright bolt punching through the creature's shell and dropping it in a smoking heap. 2 more appeared from his left flank. Marcus rolled behind a boulder as their acid spit hissed through the air where he had been standing. He came up firing, his shots precise and devastating. His military training took over, muscle memory guiding his movements as he found cover and angles of fire. But there were so many of them. For every Void Stalker that fell, 3 more seemed to take its place. The dragons fought with magnificent fury, their fire and claws cutting through the attackers, but they were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Marcus watched a young dragon, barely the size of a fighter jet, struggle against 4 Void Stalkers that had managed to ground it. Without thinking, he charged forward, firing rapidly to draw the creature's attention. His shots struck home, killing one and wounding another, but the remaining 2 turned toward him with hungry malevolence. The young dragon managed to take flight again, calling out something in the dragon language that sounded like gratitude. But Marcus had no time to appreciate the moment. A void stalker's mandibles snapped shut inches from his head as he dove aside. His plasma pistol ran dry. Marcus drew his combat knife, the monomolecular blade humming with power. It seemed pathetically small against creatures the size of buildings, but it was all he had left. A void stalker lunged at him, and Marcus slipped under its attack, driving his knife deep into what he hoped was a vital spot. Dark blood sprayed across his face as the creature collapsed. "Kane!" Zephyrus's voice boomed across the battlefield. "The third wave approaches! They come with a queen!" Marcus looked toward the forest and felt his blood turn to ice. The thing emerging from the shadows was 10 times larger than the other void stalkers, with armor plating that looked thick enough to stop starship weapons. This was what they had been waiting for, the real threat. The void stalker queen let out a roar that shattered trees and sent smaller predators scurrying for cover, her 6 eyes fixed on the cave entrance, and Marcus could see intelligence there, cunning. This wasn't just a beast driven by instinct. This was a general leading her army. "The nursery," Marcus whispered, understanding flooding through him. "She's not here for territory. She's here for food. Your eggs." Zephyrus landed beside him, the dragon's massive form casting a shadow over the battlefield. "The young are everything to us, human. Without them, our species dies. We will fight to the last flame to protect them." Marcus looked at his empty weapon, then at the massive army approaching through the trees. The math was simple and brutal. There weren't enough dragons to stop what was coming. "How many eggs did you say?" he asked. 3 dozen, Zephyrus replied, "each one precious beyond measure." "And how long until they hatch?" "Perhaps a day. Maybe less." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind racing through tactical scenarios. There was one option, but it would require everything he had. Everything. "I need to get inside the mountain," he said. "To the nursery." "Impossible. You are human. The sacred chambers are forbidden to outsiders." "Listen to me," Marcus said urgently, grabbing one of the dragon's massive claws. "That queen isn't going to stop. She'll keep sending waves until you're all exhausted. Then she'll go for the eggs. But if someone were inside, if someone could make sure the young were safe—" Zephyrus stared at him, understanding dawning in the ancient eyes. "You speak of sacrifice, human." "I speak of duty," Marcus replied. "Those children deserve a chance to live." Another wave of void stalkers was massing at the forest edge. Time was running out. "Your name," Zephyrus said quietly. "Tell me your true name." "Marcus Kane. Captain Marcus Kane." The great dragon was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that seemed to shake the very mountains. "Captain Marcus Kane, I grant you access to our most sacred place. Guard our children well." The dragon breathed a gentle stream of fire across Marcus's forehead, and suddenly he could understand the dragon language flowing around him like music. It was a gift beyond price, and Marcus felt the weight of the honor being granted to him. "Thank you," he said simply. Then he turned and ran toward the cave entrance, where destiny and death waited in equal measure. The cave system was vast, carved from living rock by generations of dragons. Marcus moved through tunnels wide enough to accommodate the massive creatures, following the gentle glow of bioluminescent crystals embedded in the walls. The air grew warmer as he descended deeper into the mountain. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of battle intensifying. The roars of dragons mixed with the chittering screams of void stalkers, punctuated by the crackling discharge of plasma breath weapons. But ahead, in the depths of the sacred mountain, lay something infinitely more precious than any battlefield victory. The nursery chamber took Marcus's breath away. It was a cathedral of crystal and stone with a domed ceiling that sparkled like stars. Arranged in careful patterns across the floor were the dragon eggs, each one nearly as tall as Marcus himself. They pulsed with internal light. and he could see shapes moving within the translucent shells. The eggs were beautiful beyond description, but they were also completely defenseless. Marcus quickly surveyed the chamber, his military mind cataloging defensive positions and potential choke points. There were 3 entrances to the nursery, but only one was large enough for the Void Stalkers to use effectively. If he could funnel them through that passage, he might be able to hold them off long enough for the eggs to hatch. He moved to the main entrance, checking his remaining ammunition. His plasma pistol had 1 power cell left, good for maybe 20 shots. His combat knife was fully charged, but useless against large numbers of enemies. And somewhere in his tactical vest, he still carried 2 concussion grenades from his military days. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. The sounds of battle above grew closer. Marcus could hear claws scraping against stone, echoing through the tunnels as Void Stalkers forced their way into the mountain. The dragons were being pushed back. A shadow appeared at the entrance to the nursery. Marcus raised his weapon, then lowered it when he recognized the golden-scaled dragon from earlier. "The defenses are failing," the dragon gasped, her breath coming in ragged pants. "The queen has broken through our lines. She comes for the young." "How long do I have?" Marcus asked. "Minutes, perhaps less." The dragon looked at the eggs with desperate love. "I am Aurelia, guardian of the dawn fire. These are my children and the children of my mate. If they die—" "They won't," Marcus said firmly. "Get back to the battle. I'll handle things here." Aurelia stared at him with eyes that held millennia of wisdom. "You are very small, human, and you are alone." "I'm never alone," Marcus replied, touching the military insignia still pinned to his chest. "I carry every Marine who ever lived with me into battle." The golden dragon bowed her massive head in respect, then turned and flew back toward the upper tunnels. Marcus watched her go, knowing it would likely be the last time he saw her alive. He didn't have long to wait. The first Void Stalker appeared at the tunnel entrance like a nightmare made real. Its chitinous body scraped against the stone walls as it forced its way through, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Behind it, Marcus could hear others following. He waited until the creature was fully in the chamber before firing. The plasma bolt struck center mass, burning through the alien's shell and dropping it in a smoking heap, but 3 more immediately took its place. Marcus fired rapidly, his shots precise despite the chaos. 2 more Void Stalkers fell, but others were scrambling over their bodies. He could hear the scraping of many legs in the tunnel beyond. A Void Stalker lunged at him from the side. Marcus rolled behind one of the larger eggs, using it as cover while he fired at the creature's legs. The alien toppled, its ichor spraying across the crystal floor. But there were so many of them. They poured into the chamber like a black tide, their eyes fixed on the glowing eggs. Marcus fell back toward the far wall, firing continuously. His power cell was almost exhausted. A mandible snapped closed inches from his face. Marcus drove his combat knife into the creature's eye, the monomolecular blade slicing deep into its brain. The Void Stalker collapsed, but 2 more took its place immediately. His pistol ran dry. Marcus discarded it and drew both concussion grenades, arming them with his thumb. He had to time this perfectly. "Come on!" he shouted, drawing the creatures toward him and away from the eggs. "Is that all you've got?" The Void Stalkers rushed him in a coordinated attack. Marcus waited until they were clustered together, then threw both grenades into their midst. The explosions shattered stone and hurled alien bodies across the chamber, but more kept coming. Through the smoke and chaos, Marcus saw her. The Void Stalker Queen filled the tunnel entrance, her massive bulk barely fitting through the passage. She was magnificent and terrible. A predator evolved to perfection. Her 6 eyes swept the chamber, cataloging threats and targets with calculating intelligence. When her gaze fell on the dragon eggs, Marcus saw something like hunger flicker across her alien features. No, he said quietly, drawing his combat knife. The blade hummed with power, but it seemed pathetically small against the mountain of chitin and malice facing him. The queen entered the chamber with deliberate grace, her soldiers spreading out to either side. She was in no hurry now. The prey was trapped, and she could take her time choosing which delicacy to sample first. Marcus stepped between the queen and the nearest cluster of eggs. "You'll have to go through me." The massive predator tilted her head, studying this tiny creature that dared to challenge her. When she spoke, her voice was like grinding stone. "You are not dragon, little warm blood. Why do you stand between me and my feast?" "Because someone has to," Marcus replied simply. The queen's laugh was a sound like breaking glass. "One small creature against my host? You cannot hope to stop me." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but I can try." Without warning, the queen's tail whipped forward like a striking snake. Marcus barely managed to dive aside, the massive appendage smashing into the wall where he had been standing. Stone fragments rained down around him. He rolled to his feet and charged, diving under the queen's massive body and driving his knife upward into what he hoped was a vulnerable spot. The blade punched through the chitin, but the wound was insignificant against something so large. The queen bucked, trying to dislodge him. Marcus held on grimly, his knife carving deeper as he was shaken like a toy. Dark blood sprayed across his face, but he kept cutting, kept fighting. A claw raked across his back, tearing through his tactical vest and into the flesh beneath. Marcus gasped in pain but didn't let go. He could see dragon eggs glowing just meters away, the young lives developing within them depending on him to hold the line. The queen slammed herself against the chamber wall, trying to crush the insignificant creature clinging to her underside. Marcus felt ribs crack, but he drove his knife deeper, seeking something vital. Through the chaos, he heard a new sound: cracking. The eggs were beginning to hatch. A tiny dragon head emerged from the nearest shell, its scales gleaming like polished silver. The hatchling looked around with bright, curious eyes, seeing the world for the first time. It was beautiful beyond words. The queen saw it too, and her hunger became overwhelming. She threw Marcus aside like a broken toy, his body hitting the far wall with bone-jarring force. He slumped to the ground, tasting blood. But he wasn't finished. Marcus forced himself to his feet, his vision blurred and his left arm hanging useless. The queen was advancing on the hatching eggs, her massive form blocking out the chamber's light. More dragon young were emerging, their tiny voices calling out in confusion and fear. There was only one thing left to do. Marcus looked at the explosive charges built into his tactical vest. Military-issue plasma cores designed to prevent equipment from falling into enemy hands. He had forgotten about them until now, but they were exactly what he needed. He began arming the charges, his fingers fumbling with the controls. 30 seconds to detonation. It would be enough to collapse this section of the chamber, burying the queen and her remaining soldiers. The eggs in the outer rings might survive behind fallen stone. 20 seconds. The queen reached the first cluster of hatching eggs. A tiny silver dragon looked up at her with trusting eyes, not understanding the danger. 15 seconds. Marcus ran forward, putting himself between the massive predator and the helpless young. The queen's mandibles opened wide, acid dripping from her jaws. "Hey!" Marcus shouted, drawing her attention. "Remember me?" 10 seconds. The queen turned toward him, irritated by this persistent annoyance. Her claws swept down to crush him once and for all. 5 seconds. Marcus smiled, thinking of his lost ship, his ruined career, his exile from everything he had ever known. None of it mattered now. He had found something worth dying for. 3 seconds. "For the core," he whispered. The explosion was tremendous. The chamber ceiling collapsed, massive stones crushing everything beneath them. The force of the blast echoed through the mountain, shaking the very foundations of the dragon stronghold. When the dust settled, Marcus Kane lay buried beneath tons of rubble, his body broken but his duty complete. The Void Stalker Queen was dead, her army scattered and leaderless. And in the outer reaches of the chamber, protected by fallen stone, 36 dragon eggs continued their ancient process of birth. Above, in the tunnels leading to the surface, Zephyrus felt the mountain shake. He knew what had happened. Understood the choice the human had made. A life freely given to protect those who could not protect themselves. The purple dragon bowed his great head in respect. In all his centuries of existence, he had rarely witnessed such courage from any species, let alone from one so small and fragile. The battle above was turning. Without their queen, the Void Stalkers lost coordination, becoming simply beasts driven by instinct rather than intelligent soldiers following strategy. The dragons rallied, driving the survivors back into the forest and ensuring they would not return. But the real victory had been won in the depths of the mountain, by a single human who had chosen to stand between monsters and innocence. As the last of the Void Stalkers fled into the night, Aurelia landed beside Zephyrus. Her golden scales were dimmed with exhaustion and sorrow. "The nursery?" she asked. "Protected," Zephyrus replied solemnly, "at great cost." Together, they descended into the mountain to assess the damage. The main chamber was devastated, filled with fallen stone and the remains of alien predators, but they could hear sounds from the outer chambers, tiny voices calling out in the ancient dragon tongue. The children were alive. Working carefully, the dragons cleared away the rubble, revealing the miracle that Marcus Kane had died to protect. 36 dragon hatchlings, each one perfect and healthy, looked up at their parents with bright, intelligent eyes. It would take days to fully excavate the chamber and recover Marcus's body. When they finally found him, his form was twisted and broken. But his face held an expression of peace. In his final moments, he had seen the children he died for, had known his sacrifice was meaningful. The dragons carried his body to a place of honor, laying him to rest in the crystal chambers reserved for their greatest heroes. It was unprecedented. No non-dragon had ever been granted such recognition. But then, no non-dragon had ever earned it as Marcus Kane had earned it. As word of his sacrifice spread through the dragon clans, something extraordinary began to happen. The story grew, taking on mythic proportions with each telling. The banished human warrior who had chosen honor over safety, duty over survival. The dragons remembered everything, and they never forgot a debt of honor. 3 months after the battle, Zephyrus stood before the Council of Flames, the governing body of all dragon clans across the galaxy. The ancient amphitheater was carved from a single massive asteroid, its walls lined with crystals that captured and reflected the light of distant stars. Representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered to hear his report. "The human fought with courage beyond measure," Zephyrus said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "He asked for nothing in return. He expected no reward. He simply saw innocence in danger and chose to act." Elder Piraxis, whose scales had turned white with age, leaned forward on his perch. "You ask us to honor a member of the species that destroyed the Crimson Nebula colonies, the same species that hunted our kind for sport on 17 worlds. I ask you to honor Marcus Kane," Zephyrus replied firmly. "Not his species, but the individual who transcended everything we believed about humanity." The debate continued for hours. Some dragons spoke of ancient grudges, of human aggression and expansion throughout the galaxy. Others told stories of cooperation, of humans who had shown unexpected wisdom or courage in isolated incidents. But when Aurelia rose to speak, the chamber fell silent. The Golden Dragon was known throughout their civilization as the keeper of truth, one who never spoke lightly or without purpose. "I have studied the recordings from our defensive systems," she announced. I have analyzed every moment of the human's actions from his arrival until his death. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing Marcus's crashed fighter, his first encounter with the dragons, his decision to help in the battle. Observe his tactical assessment, Aurelia continued. He identified the Void Stalker flanking maneuver within minutes of seeing them. His military experience was vast, his combat skills exceptional. The holograms shifted, showing Marcus fighting alongside dragons, protecting the young warrior who had been grounded by multiple enemies. But skill alone did not define him, Aurelia said. Watch this moment carefully. The display showed Marcus standing before the Queen, his tiny form dwarfed by the massive predator. The conversation was clear, the Queen offering him a choice between life and meaningless death. He could have surrendered, Aurelia continued. The Queen would have allowed him to live if he had simply stepped aside. Instead, he chose to stand between a mountain of teeth and claws and 36 helpless children who were not even of his species. Elder Peraxis was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of millennia. What do you propose, Keeper of the Sky Flame? That we do what dragons have always done when faced with true heroism, Zephyrus replied. We remember, we honor, we ensure the story lives forever. The vote was unanimous. The rite of eternal flame had not been performed in over 3,000 years. It was reserved for the greatest heroes of dragonkind, those whose actions transcended the boundaries of their own lives to inspire entire civilizations. Marcus Kane would be the first non-dragon ever to receive such an honor. The ceremony took place on Sanctuary, the dragon's most sacred world. Representatives from every clan gathered in the Crystal Caverns, where the preserved histories of their people were kept in living stone. The walls themselves remembered, storing memories in crystalline matrices that could replay events with perfect clarity for millions of years. Zephyrus carried Marcus's body to the center of the great chamber, placing him on a bier carved from meteor stone. The human looked small and fragile, surrounded by the massive dragon forms, but there was dignity in his stillness. Marcus Kane, Zephyrus began, his voice echoing through the sacred space. Captain of the Terran Federation Marines, defender of the innocent, guardian of our children. One by one, the dragons came forward to share their memories. Each thought, each moment of Marcus's sacrifice was breathed into the crystal walls as dragon fire. The living stone absorbed everything, preserving not just the facts but the emotions, the courage, the love that had driven one small human to face impossible odds. Aurelia spoke of his tactical brilliance, his instant understanding of the Void Stalker strategy. Zephyrus shared the moment when Marcus had insisted on helping, asking for nothing but the chance to do what was right. The 36 young dragons, now 3 months old and the size of small aircraft, added their own voices to the ceremony. They had no conscious memory of their hatching, but something deeper than thought recognized the one who had died for them. As the ceremony reached its climax, something unprecedented happened. The crystal walls began to sing. The stored memories resonated with each other, creating harmonics that had never been heard before. Marcus's sacrifice, combined with the dragon's gratitude and respect, generated something new in their ancient archives. A frequency of pure heroism that would echo through the crystal network, connecting all dragon worlds. When the rite concluded, Marcus Kane's story was no longer just a memory. It had become part of the fundamental structure of dragon civilization, woven into the very stones that held their history. But the dragons were not content to simply preserve the story. They wanted to share it. The first human ship to enter dragon space after the Void Stalker attack was a small trading vessel called the Wandering Star. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew were surprised when they were hailed by a massive dragon dreadnought and invited aboard. Zephyrus himself greeted them in the ship's central chamber, a space large enough to accommodate his enormous form. "We have a story to tell you," the dragon said without preamble. "A story about one of your kind." The crystal display that materialized showed Marcus's final battle in perfect detail. The human crew watched in stunned silence as the events unfolded, seeing their fellow humans stand against impossible odds to protect alien children. "We did not know humans were capable of such selflessness," Zephyrus explained. "Marcus Kane taught us that heroism is not bound by species or politics. It exists in individuals who choose to be greater than themselves." Captain Chen wiped tears from her eyes. "I've never heard of him. Marcus Kane isn't in any of our military records." "He was banished," Zephyrus replied. "Cast out by his own people for political convenience. Yet when faced with the choice between safety and sacrifice, he chose to protect those who could not protect themselves." The dragon's words sparked something in the human crew. They had been traitors, concerned with profit and survival. But seeing Marcus's story, understanding the depth of his courage, changed something fundamental in their perspective. When the wandering star returned to human space, they carried more than trade goods. They carried a legend. The story spread through the frontier worlds like wildfire. In bars and trading posts, on colony ships and mining stations, people gathered to hear about the banished Marine who had become a hero to humanity's former enemies. But the dragons ensured the story reached even further. Dragon ships began appearing in human space, not as conquerors, but as storytellers. They sought out military bases, academies, and training centers, sharing the crystal recordings of Marcus's sacrifice with anyone willing to listen. The effect was transformative. Young soldiers and officers saw what true courage looked like, understood that honor was not about following orders but about protecting the innocent. Marcus Kane's example inspired a new generation of humans to be better than their predecessors. The story reached the Terran Federation Council just as they were debating whether to increase military spending for another expansion campaign. When the Admiralty saw the Dragon recordings, when they witnessed what Marcus Kane had accomplished through sacrifice rather than aggression, the entire debate shifted. Admiral Harrison, who had signed Marcus's banishment order, stood before the full council with tears in his eyes. "We threw away our greatest hero," he said. "We exiled the one man who truly understood what it means to serve. Marcus Kane showed the galaxy that humanity is capable of greatness. We failed him, but we don't have to fail his legacy." The vote to end the expansion campaigns was unanimous. Instead, the Federation redirected its resources toward exploration, diplomacy, and mutual defense treaties. The age of human aggression was ending, replaced by something Marcus Kane would have recognized and approved of. On the dragon world of Sanctuary, the crystal walls continued to sing their song of sacrifice. But now they were joined by new voices, as humans who had been inspired by Marcus's story added their own acts of heroism to the growing legend. A Federation medical ship that risked everything to evacuate civilians from a plague-stricken planet. A mining crew that chose to share their resources with stranded aliens rather than pursue profit. A diplomatic team that walked unarmed into a war zone to negotiate peace. Each story was different, but they all carried the same spark that Marcus Kane had kindled in his final moments. The understanding that true strength came from protecting others, not conquering them. Years passed, and the legend continued to grow. Children on both human and dragon worlds learned Marcus's story as part of their education. Military academies made his sacrifice required study, teaching cadets that the greatest victory sometimes required the ultimate sacrifice. A monument was erected on the world where Marcus had died. A crystal spire that reached toward the stars. Humans and dragons worked together to build it, their cooperation a living testament to the bridge his sacrifice had created between their species. On the anniversary of the battle, ships from dozens of worlds gathered in orbit. Human vessels flew alongside dragon dreadnoughts, their crews sharing stories and celebrating the memory of the man who had shown them all what heroism truly meant. But perhaps the most fitting memorial was smaller and more personal. Aurelia, now ancient even by dragon standards, often visited the nursery chamber where Marcus had made his final stand. The space had been rebuilt and expanded, accommodating not just dragon young but children from many species who came to learn about courage and sacrifice. In the center of the chamber stood a simple plaque, written in both human script and dragon flame writing. Marcus Kane, Captain, Terran Federation Marines. He stood between monsters and innocence, choosing honor over survival. The galaxy remembers. Below the inscription, 36 small handprints were pressed into the crystal. The dragons Marcus had died to protect, now adults themselves with children of their own, had each left their mark as a promise. They would remember. They would honor his sacrifice, and they would ensure that his story lived on, inspiring future generations to choose courage over comfort, sacrifice over safety. The banished fighter had perished protecting a dragon's den, just as the legend proclaimed. But in dying, Marcus Kane had become something greater than he had ever been in life. He had become proof that heroism exists in every species, waiting for the moment when ordinary individuals choose to become extraordinary. The dragons, who remembered everything, would never let that lesson be forgotten. In the depths of space, on worlds yet to be discovered, the Crystal Network continued to sing its song of sacrifice. And somewhere in that eternal melody, Marcus Kane's spirit lived on, inspiring others to stand between monsters and innocence, to choose what was right over what was easy. His name had become a legend, but more importantly, his example had become a beacon, guiding humanity and their former enemies toward a future built on cooperation rather than conquest. The galaxy was a better place because one man had chosen to be a hero when heroes were needed most. And in the end, that was the greatest monument any warrior could ask for.